You're about to learn how to master the pickleball return. We're going to teach you right here at Halua Racket and Paddle, who let us use their facility. Hitting a deep return is essential to becoming a better pickleball player. Since the ball must bounce on the other side of the court after the return, it creates an opportunity for a few advantages. First, pickleball players of all levels make the common mistake of stepping into the court after a serve. This provides an opportunity for you to place the ball at their feet, forcing them to make a shot off their back foot, which is much less consistent. Second, the deeper return gives you more time to approach the kitchen line and get balanced before your opponent even has a chance to hit the ball. A lot of players rely heavily on their drive to generate offense on the third shot.
If you can hit a deep return, then you and your partner have more time to react if your opponents choose to drive the ball. Just like we taught in our video on the third shot, it's much easier to add the same spin your opponent gave you rather than trying to oppose it. If your opponent hits a hard topspin serve, it's easier to return it with a slice than it is to return it with topspin. And if your opponent hits a slice serve, it's easier to return it with topspin than it is with backspin. But just because it's easier does not mean it's better. We can use this same fact against our opponent to make their third shot drop more difficult. If you're able to, hitting your returns with topspin will give you an advantage since your opponents will have a harder time hitting topspin drives. To do this, you should keep your swing compact with minimal backswing. Since your opponents have likely added pace to their serve, focusing on using your body weight to hit the ball back will be more consistent than trying to generate the force with your swing. To add topspin, you should brush up the backside of the ball in a low to high motion. The added downward force from the ball's spin allows you to hit the return harder while also keeping it in the court. To get the most consistent return, ensure that you're making contact to the front and side of your body, around the same area as your front leg. The best way to set up good contact is to focus on positioning.
Positioning is crucial for making a strong return. Here are several ways to put yourself in the right spot for success. Since you have to let the serve bounce before the return, it's a good idea to stand a couple feet behind the baseline. If you make the mistake of standing too close to the baseline, then any deep serve is going to be problematic for you. Often you'll be playing on a court with minimal space between the baseline and back fence. To avoid hitting the back fence when a deep serve is given to you, keep your stroke short and compact. Assuming that your forehand is stronger than your backhand, it's a good idea to position yourself to receive more forehands than backhands. You'll want to stand slightly to the left side of your court to make this happen. This will force your opponent to hit small targets if they decide to aim at your backhand or hit the short corner. Right before your opponent makes contact on their serve, perform a split step. This motion gets your body in balance and ready to move quickly in any direction. Then stay low through your stroke and watch the ball as you finish your swing. After returning, you'll want to implement the return and run strategy. Return the ball, then immediately move towards the kitchen to maintain the advantage. Getting to the kitchen line faster is a great advantage that puts offensive pressure on your opponents. This will be the goal after every return.
But not all returns allow you to get to the kitchen line on the first try. Let's cover what to do in those cases. If you hit your return too high and short, your opponent will have an opportunity to attack. To counter this, stay back and play defensively, looking to hit a fourth shot drop. Another scenario is that you hit a return which doesn't grant you enough time to rush the kitchen line. In this case, take as much ground as you can and get low for a fourth shot drop or reset. Then, work your way back up to the kitchen line with each ball. The ability to work from midcourt is what separates most intermediate players from becoming advanced. Even if you know how to position yourself, you've got to add variety to your game to keep your opponents on their toes. While a deep topspin return is often the best option, there are several other returns you should mix in.
Here are 5 different types to add to your arsenal. First up is a hard slice. While a slice may make your opponent's drive easier because of the spin relationship we mentioned earlier, it's still a solid option to mix in. Backspin tends to keep the ball low, which can be difficult to lift off the ground. Even a slice that stays higher can kick hard after its bounce, throwing off your opponent. The most consistent way to add slice is by pushing underneath the ball with your body weight using an open paddle face. You can also add extra wrist movement for additional kick, but it's less consistent. The next option is side spin. You can add side spin to your return to make the ball curve through the air, which is difficult for your opponents to read. To accomplish this, swipe across the bottom of the ball from one side to the other. Your paddle face should be toward your opponent and slightly raised. And number 3 is a high lob. Hitting a lofty and slow return can force errors out of your opponent. Most people prefer to drive back a high lob, so you can use this to your advantage. If your opponents are making errors or often overswinging on their drives, tempt them with a lob, which leads to an unforced error. Additionally, hitting a high lob gives you plenty of time to approach the net and get ready. The worst case scenario is that they drive the ball effectively, but you are already at the kitchen line to play defense.
Now let's learn the short angle return return. There are two scenarios where this can be effective. One is if your opponents are standing too far back off the baseline once they serve. In this case, a short angle forces them to run toward the ball, which adds momentum to their shot and is much harder to control. Another great scenario to use this shot is when your opponents are driving their third shots often. A return that is kept low and short will reduce their margin of error over the net while also tempting your opponents to speed it up anyway. Most players think short balls should be sped up, so giving them the opportunity can lead to a likely error. Keep in mind that your return must also be low in this case. If you return short but the ball bounces high, their drive will be too easy, which can get you punished instead. Finally, short hopping the ball is a great tool to mix in when your opponents have strong serves. Simply angle your paddle tip down and catch the ball early off the bounce. It's also useful when you are pushed back off the baseline and don't have space for a full swing. But be careful when using a short hop return because it's often weak and creates a high bounce for your opponents. Now you know which returns to mix in, but keep in mind that a deep topspin return is going to be your best choice in most cases.
A return is more than just responding to a serve. Strategic returns set up the point for success. Let's cover the most effective scenarios to strategize with your return. In most pickleball matches, one opponent will be more aggressive than another. You can minimize that threat through a well-placed return. After you identify a player who is more likely to poach on fourth shots, start returning to them every time. If the aggressive player is forced to hit a third shot, this makes them stay back at the baseline longer. That means they will have to wait to poach, which buys you more time to take the offensive. Returns can also be used to counter targeting. In many pickleball games, one partner will be weaker than the other, so your opponent will take advantage of the imbalance by targeting the weakest link, especially on their third shot drop. Since your opponent's goal is to get to the kitchen line, that often means that they will hit their third shot to the less aggressive player, which makes their advance forward much easier. To counter this, place your return on the same side of the court as your weaker partner. This forces your opponent to now hit a third shot down the line to your partner rather than cross court. The margin of error down the line is much lower than cross court, which makes their shot more difficult and less consistent. Try employing this tactic whenever you notice targeting from your opponents. A final phrase worth remembering is down the middle solves the riddle. Aiming at the tee on the baseline forces your partners to communicate which person will take the third shot. If they aren't used to playing with each other, then you might find that aiming in the middle will net you a few free points. At the very least, it makes your opponents pause to consider who should take the ball, which buys you more time to approach the kitchen.
Now you've mastered returns and know how to quickly advance to the kitchen line. But once you're there, you need to know what to do. Check out this video to learn how to dink effectively.
And to learn even more tips, subscribe to our newsletter where we return to your inbox on a regular basis. Return.